Ashton here with Love, Life and Disability.
Hi and welcome back to another episode of Love, Life and Disability. And today I'm joined by Chris. So Chris has been working at the Media Trust and has a fantastic campaign which is called Reframing Disability. And this project was focusing on news, and he does training and work across the whole of the industry to try and increase disabled people's representation. And it's a huge passion for Chris, and he's here today to tell us a little bit more. How are you doing, Chris?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm really excited to have you on today because obviously I can't really talk too much about my day job in general when I do my podcasting, but we've connected before about reframing and disability, and I was wondering if you can tell our viewers and listeners a little bit more about what that project's about.
Absolutely, yeah. So this project arose about a year ago now, and I started working for Media Trust at the start of March 2020, and so it's the project as it was originally intended hasn't really panned out because of the pandemic, but we've been able to move a lot of stuff online and deliver it that way. And basically the project, which was sort of come up with before I started at Media Trust, was a project to try and increase the visibility of disabled people, originally focused just on BBC broadcast news, so TV and radio news just within the BBC. And it's now sort of taken on some legs of its own, and we've started doing work across casting and comedy and drama and entertainment and radio and so many different areas, which is really amazing, and also working with partners outside the BBC as well. And basically the project is trying to combat the fact that when we see disabled people, first of all, it's trying to combat that we very rarely see disabled people in our broadcasting at all. But when we do, it's usually that they're talking about disability. I think it gives the impression to the public that disabled people are not very productive and not very successful, but those who are, it's just by being experts in their own lived experience, rather than all the huge numbers of disabled people who are experts and successful in a huge range of industries, and that's all being missed. And I think the quote that the statistic that really shocks me all the time was a piece of Scope research, which found that 1 in 3 people in Britain think that disabled people are less productive than non-disabled people. And I think media and broadcast has a big role to play in that. I think that's where, we all, not through any fault of our own, but we all live in our sort of small area. We don't all know all 65 million British people. And so the people that we know are never going to be fully representative of society, and that's inevitable. But one of the ways in which we find out about the diversity of society and diversity of the people we don't know and don't meet is through TV and radio, both entertainment and news, documentaries, so on. So it's really, really important that when we are, and particularly for the BBC as a public service broadcaster, but also for any broadcaster, that we're showing the world and the country as it really is, and not just a particular subsection of it. Because when you do only show that subsection, or you only show marginalized people in a certain light or in a certain context, then that's going to lead to the public seeing those groups as only ever existing within that context.
It's like with perception as well, and we do need more people on screen and even behind the camera. And things that I've always said is, especially within production teams, if your in-house is purely white, middle class, maybe males or females, and you're not representative of LGBTQ, BAME and disability, you're not going to be able to get that into your output and get that into your content, because a lot of the time people hire within their own skin. A lot of the time they only go to the stories and the interests that they know. So if you're not representative, like 50-50 and so forth, and what external is, then how can things be improved?
Absolutely, I totally agree. And I think there are huge numbers of people who would like to work in TV, media, the arts, the creative sectors very broadly, who feel unable to, or don't know where to begin, and feel that it's not an industry that would welcome them. And I think sometimes there's truth in that, but a lot of the time it's a perception, which actually, once they start getting into it, they realize, okay, I actually am welcome here. But it's that first barrier of even believing that this is a space in which you are welcome and which you belong, which is the biggest challenge. I'm really, really delighted to see the number of broadcasters, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, and others who are now running training schemes in production and tech and so many other areas. I think that having those schemes are really, really important for those who don't have connections and who can't just get into the industry by knowing a guy or by going to the right bar or restaurant or whatever and meeting the right people. And that can be, as you said, sort of working class people, it can be disabled people, it can be women, it can be people of color, but it can also be just people who didn't grow up with those connections, people who didn't grow up with that confidence, maybe people who were quite shy in school even, and so never felt that they were, they didn't come out of their shell until later, by which time they felt like it was too late to get into this sort of more extroverted industry, I guess. And so I think those schemes are really, really important in terms of building that diversity. But I also worry that by only having schemes for entry level, you're also missing out on a huge amount of talent of people who've got further down the career path, have a lot of transferable skills, but can't necessarily make that move without going right back to the beginning of their career ladder. And I think a lot of industries, but broadcast is one of them, is one which is not always great at recognizing those transferable skills.
I totally agree. So a lot of the time I've always been brought up within where I work to be told, oh, it's kind of like career jungle gym. So sometimes if you want to go up, you've got to go sideways, and then you've got to go up, then maybe drop back down, go a little bit sideways, go back up. A lot of the time it's not just bum, 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 and you keep going up the ladder. It's really not like that. But having said that, no roads literally in the world are just straight. They're all a bit bumpy, a little bit diversions, and there's multiple ways, like let's use the analogy of making 4. You could do 1 + 3 = 4. 4 + 0, 3 + 1. There's so many ways to get to that one place. And sometimes, like with the transferable skills, some people will recognize it, but not everyone. And again, it's those people that maybe have come a little bit left field into the industries that get it, they understand it. Where other people may look at a CV and be like, oh no, how possibly could you be an assistant producer? You haven't even been a researcher. But they've not took into account the person might have done business analysis, and that's researching into content, that's researching into products and working with stakeholders, and they could bring a vast amount of stuff into the actual piece. The same with project and product management. It's why can't you switch between both fields? Because in order to have a project, you need the product. So then you're working with that anyway. And transferable skills is really important. I always recommend doing SWOT analysis, like looking at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and what are your threats. So then you know what you've got to deliver on. And with women, hopefully this won't come across sexist, but a lot of guys will look at like a CV and go, yeah, I can do that, and it's like that. Yeah, I'm applying. Where a woman might go, oh, I can't do that, I can't apply. One thing, they can't do it, they will not apply it. And I don't know why our brains are kind of like that as women. We just look at what we can't do as opposed to what we can. And I think we need to take a leaf out of the guys' books there and start applying for things.
Absolutely. And I think even I've done a lot of recruitment, and I obviously work in charity, which is a very women-dominated industry. So I've got a lot of female colleagues, including at very senior levels, which I know is not often the experience for a lot of men like me, sort of at relatively junior level, entering an industry. And that's given me a sort of real, just so many female role models, I guess. But one thing I constantly notice is that men, when applying for jobs and when interviewing for jobs, will constantly say, I did this, I made this happen, I led on this. Whereas women will say, I was part of this, I was on the team that delivered this, and not take ownership, even if they've actually done most of the legwork and most of the strategy for it. They'll still make it a collaborative thing, and they'll sort of, they won't have the full agency of the work that they did. Whereas men, even if they were like making the coffee for a meeting, they'll be like, oh yeah, I delivered this. And I think that's also something I've learned to see through, but often isn't something. And it means that women often come across worse in interviews when actually they might be the better candidate.
Totally agree. It's like words as well. One of my friends applied for a job and she didn't get the job because she didn't show leadership within her answers. So instead of saying I will, it's I would like. I would like to do this and I would like to do that. And the other candidate that got it was like, well, I will be doing this and I will be doing that. It's not it where she was like, well, obviously I don't know what I can do once I get a job. It's she was trying to go, this is what I would like to do. But where he was like, well, no, I'm going to do it. Like, this is, you want leadership, this is what you're going to get. And based on how they both scripted their words, I will and I would, the other person got the job.
Which is also, I find, slightly depressing, because someone who's never worked for this company saying I will do this, that would put me off, I think, because that's saying, you're saying I will come in and it doesn't matter what's already happening, it doesn't matter what other teams are working on, I'm just going to come and bulldoze through that and set my own agenda. I'd much rather have someone collaborative, but I think that so often gets missed. And as I say, it's not a 100% correlation, but there is definitely a correlation between being from marginalized groups and having that kind of more collaborative and more sort of less boastful approach, I think.
So with the reframing of disability, as a lot of people may know at the moment, you've got the training courses out there. How can other groups apply for this? And as we know, ITV, BBC are all signed up to this. Can other businesses which are not in the media industry also sign up to these sort of courses and have these delivered?
Yeah, absolutely. So Media Trust and myself will be running these training sessions for really anyone in the media industry that's interested, and they're quite tailored. As I mentioned before, one thing we found really interesting is that we made this training entirely for journalists and news producers. And so every example we gave was related to journalism and inviting guests on for broadcast interviews. And yet we had so many people coming from, working on reality shows for BBC Three who still found it relevant. And that's been really interesting discovery for me to see how much crossover there is. And so we've really expanded it beyond that. And really we can make it relevant for any organization who'd benefit from it. So yeah, absolutely get in touch with Media Trust. I can plug our email at the end to get in touch and work out how we can deliver training with you.
And what has been your experience with disability?
So I'm autistic. I was diagnosed when I was 14. So not too early, not too late. But I only really started to identify with disability and as being disabled when I was at university, which was my first time living away from home. I was very young when I started university because I was very young for my school year. So I started a month after I turned 18 and just felt completely overwhelmed and sort of like I'd been thrown in this huge pond as this tiny fish and had, really struggled to make friends and I did have friends, but I really struggled to do things like go and eat in the sort of college canteen and be surrounded by all these people and all this noise. And so my pretty much my whole career has been focused on disability. I always wanted to work, and relating back to what we were talking about before, my career's also been quite an interesting one because I was one of those people who thought I did acting at university. I've done stand-up comedy since then, and writing and journalism and so on. And I never felt like, although that was a thing I did as a sort of casual hobby at university, I never felt like that was an industry I was welcome in. And I always thought I wanted to go into the charity world. And I've always worked for an equality charity and then moving into an autism charity. And now I'm obviously working in the broadcast industry, but focused on disability across the piece. And that's been a real joy for me to, even though it's not been, as you said before, it's not been a straight line. It's been quite a sort of wiggle around, but to now be working in broadcasting in media, not in a production role, but in this sort of creative diversity role has been so amazing and really enjoyable for me.
When you got your diagnosis at 14, do you feel like that was a weight lifted off your shoulders? Did you feel something, you had something, but you wasn't quite too sure? How did the diagnosis help you at that age?
Again, it was a very delayed reaction. Like at the time, I just was like, I don't really get this. And also I didn't really understand at that time. I was like, I got this, like, I remember getting this newsletter like my local town's disability charity or disability organization within the council, and being so confused because I was like, I'm autistic, I'm not disabled. Because I just didn't, at that time, I just thought disability meant physical disabilities. I had no concept that this would count within disability, and I just had no real concept of it. But because I had that diagnosis, I received counseling from the age of 16, which was just like a complete lifesaver. I saw them regularly from 16 up to about 22, and they were just completely essential for me to be able to articulate how I was feeling and start to put it into words. And as you say, over time, it wasn't a rapid thing, but over time it was like a weight was lifting off my shoulders as I started to understand all this feeling of isolation and frustration and not understanding what's going on and just feeling quite lonely, started to make sense a little bit. And I also started to learn what was important to me and how to make those friendships as well. But not just how to make friendships, but also what kind of people I wanted to be friends with. At school, I always was so desperate to be in with the cool kids, and I was always like in with the nerds. And that was my group. And I was so desperate to be like in with the cool kids. And then which is obviously a very teenage thing. And then I realized, well, friends are really important to me. I'm an extroverted person. I do need to spend a lot of time with others, but I'm going to spend time with people that really make me happy, and that really appreciate me for me, and I appreciate them for them. So I'm, not everybody always necessarily values diagnosis, but for me it was really important. But it wasn't, as I say, it wasn't a sort of light switch going off.
And in terms of the career at the moment, obviously working at the media and you're working within broadcast, you've got the experience of doing the stand-up and stuff. Do you want to be working at like ITV, Channel 4? Is that the ultimate aim? Or what would you say the aim is for yourself at the moment with your career? Which direction?
Yeah, I definitely want to move. I love working for my organization, and Media Trust is such a unique charity. We are very charity, but we're also very media. And that's quite unusual for charities. They're usually very separate to the industries they work with, whereas we are really implanted within that industry. But I think I've found my area, which is wanting to work in broadcast and working on that diversity, and working on that sort of it's the creative side of diversity. I don't claim by any stretch of the imagination to be any good at the sort of HR and workforce side of diversity, but it's that creative diversity and on-screen diversity that I love. But one thing this pandemic's also taught me is that that creative outlet that I've always had in doing stand-up, writing and acting is something I really need in my life, and has been completely missing for the last year. So I also think that, although I wouldn't be working in as a on-screen talent, being in this industry gives me the confidence to go out on even if it's just a pub basement and doing some more stand-up, is back. And it's sort of reignited that spark, which is a really good feeling. Because I think, some people, and I think it's true for a lot of people in broadcast, even those who don't have creative roles, there is that desire and that spark to do something creative. And I really don't want to lose that because of the pandemic.
Totally represent with that, especially when I was more admin roles. I was always trying to work out ways, how can I be creative? Like, telling me to raise purchase orders is not very creative.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a fancy Excel document which is going to have pivot charts, and trying to get more creative with the admin side of things and then how I'd present my information, because I just needed to be creative. So then when I got the chance to organise, I don't know, things like away days or different events or pitch ideas, I then did that. But a lot of my stuff, similar to the podcasting and the YouTubing, I do all on top of the day job, so I can that creative kick, which is so important. But working with people like DANC, the Disability Arts Network community, come across that, they're posting out jobs all the time, looking for people from comedians, writers, artists, actors, and they're a fantastic group on Twitter and also on email for people to follow it who are disabled in that creative industry, wanting to take that step further. Yeah,
I think that's really interesting and useful for me. And Thank you for sharing that. And I completely agree about the sort of admin and creative sort of competition, I guess, that there is sometimes. And it's often a shock, particularly for people who come into the industry from university, because when you're at university, you sort of get to pretend that you're a CEO or really high up. You get involved in a drama production and you are the director or the producer straight away. Then you graduate from university, and even if you go straight into the industry, you're probably doing a job like a runner or a researcher or a script associate, where most of your tasks will be printing, photocopying, making coffee. You're not going to be doing really creative tasks, and that's how you get your experience, so you can work your way up into getting those more creative opportunities. But I think it's really important to have both, actually. And sometimes when I'm really involved in something really creative and strategic at work, I actually quite like the opportunity to go and do something really boring and manual, because it sort of gives you a bit of a break as well.
Do you find sometimes your head might come up with an idea and you're like, oh, I really want to do that, and then boom, something else comes in, and it's just trying to like process everything, and it's like, well, what can I do? I want to do this, I want to do that. I want to do everything.
100%. And something I always have a problem with, especially when I'm trying to write stand-up, is that I'll come up with ideas in like the shower or while having a swim, and then I'll just never write them down. And the next day I'll be like, what did I think of? That was really funny. But just can't at all remember what I've done. So I think, yeah, trying to actually turn some, ideas and things that just pop into my head into things that can actually work is always a challenge.
I have notebooks next to my bed, and I always talk to my phone. I best not say hello to him, otherwise he'll wake up. I'll write ideas down, but then sometimes, like, I'm insomnia at the moment, so I'm not really sleeping that well, but I'm half asleep, half awake, and then I'll try and write something in the morning. I'll go, I need to write that up, and then I'm there looking at it going, I haven't got a clue what I've wrote there. And at the time, it's like really, really good. Like, I had one last night, and I've had a look at my notes again this morning. I'm kind of like, meh.
What on earth did I just write? Oh yeah, no, I can relate to that quite heavily.
I was always looking to do something stand up. I'll put you in contact with one of my friends if you're not already aware of him. He's called Adam. He does a Rush of Laughter.
Oh yeah, I've heard of it, but I haven't come into contact with them.
And he's got a lot of different artists. I've worked with him quite a fair bit from an events business. Spoke about being an artist, and he would always give me some artists to come on to the events that I've been organising, and I'd go down and have a look at some of the talent that I'd fucking book it and have a cabin in Manchester to come check out his talent, see what he's got in his books. And we're always having chats about different comedians, up and coming people, and
amazing
people. So always happy to try and network.
Oh, amazing! Thank you. Yeah, and I'm actually a sort of a Mancunian myself as well.
I try to be funny, but I piss out of myself, and I think I do that to like people say it's like to compensate, like people, instead of taking everything that we live with serious, because it is serious what a lot of us can live with and how it can affect our lives, is that you overcompensate things with comedy to try and like make it seem a little bit easier to live with.
Totally, yeah. And comedy is such it's such a break from reality. That's why I've always loved it, either as someone watching or someone performing, is that it's such a break from just like the world, and especially at the moment, that's so important. And it's also quite interesting. I've often just like, stand-up is a very weird beast. Like, there's some people who are incredibly funny day to day who just could not do stand-up, and then there are people who are actually quite serious and stern in real life, and then they get on a stage and just make you howl with laughter. It's quite a weird sort of medium, really.
I've come across that same scenario. Like, at work, there was this guy, and he was funny but more irritating. Anyway, he wanted to be a comedian, and he went along, to one of those ones that keep going until you get booed off.
Oh yeah, Gong Show, yeah.
And we were like, oh, like, it's like it was in one of my previous jobs, and he's like, yeah, come along, yeah, I'm going to be a comedian. And it would make everybody laugh in the office with everything that he came out with. But then when he went on stage, he tried to do one of those crowd pleasers, audience kind of like, how we all doing? Oh, see, you're a bit bored, you're on your phone. Do you know where
yeah.
And I think he party scene. It didn't even last 10 seconds.
Yeah. I've never understood that. I know people who love doing those gong shows, and I just don't get it. There must be something masochistic about it. And I've always, and I think partly it's being autistic. I've always benefited from like having some sort of structure. So the first time I did stand up was because a friend asked me to for his own show. But then when I started to do it properly, it was through Soho Theatre, who have an amazing scheme called Soho Young Company, which is getting sort of just doing classes for. They have classes for sort of people who've already started doing comedy, but they also have classes for complete beginners doing stand-up, sketch, drag, and so on. And that was really helpful for me, because if you told me just go to, turn up in this pub basement and do 5 minutes to a bunch of people you've never met, that would have horrified me. There's no way I could have done that. But once I'd had the opportunity to do it on, through this course, preparing something for 10 weeks, getting feedback, and then performing to a group of people who I knew were supportive, made it much easier to then make the jump into doing open mic.
And what about acting? What's your preference there within the acting? Or do you still want to be an actor?
I really miss doing it, and it's something I did a lot at university, and I was in a lot of different, and I actually did a lot of new writing. So like plays which other students had written would then be put on by the Drama Society. And I loved it. It was always just and especially at university, where like it was such a nice break from study and getting to know, people from different parts of the university and performing together. And it's something it's something I've not really done since uni, and it's something I didn't really appreciate until the pandemic hit. You take it for granted, and then once it's no longer an option, you realize how much you enjoy doing that stuff. I couldn't do it professionally, and I'm not good enough to do it professionally, and I don't have the patience, and I really admire people who do. But doing, the sort of community theatre, I guess, and actually, especially in London, there's loads of places that do really good community theatre. So that kind of thing I'd really like to get back into, but who knows how much longer we're going to have to wait.
There was a lady on Twitter, Steph Lacey, who does quite a bit too, and Simon Naylor. And one of her lockdown projects, I thought it was pretty cool. She'd write stories for children. So you would write in. So I wrote in and basically said, I have a niece. She's 4. She loves this. She loves that. She's got a brother called Thomas. This is how old Thomas is. And just like literally a few words, she went away, and then based off that, she would write a story. And
it's amazing.
Sent it as a story and upload them to YouTube and give you the video. And she did that every single day for like pretty much the full length of lockdown number 1. And other people now, what they've decided to do is, you've got a bunch of writers, all of you will write your own play, then they'll get a bunch of actors, and you know where this is going. You'll act that play, and then they'll put them together, whether or not it's going to be a monologue piece or whether or not they cast it whereby you're all going to be in the end video, but you'll say your line, boom, 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 boom. And
I just love doing new writing performance as well, because it's your blank slate. Like it's, if you're performing anything, especially like if you're doing Shakespeare or something, which has already been done a billion times, you sort of feel pressure to do it differently. And obviously when it's been done that many times, there's no such thing as new, like it's all been done. Whereas when you're doing something new, you can sort of take the character and really make it your own. And so I really enjoy, I really love doing that. And I think I think it's really enjoyable for actors as well. It's more creative than just performing a character that's been done to death already.
No, I totally agree. I'll send you their details in their Twitter. Check them out, and
I will do.
Different opportunities. So what's going to be next for yourself then, Chris? At the moment, you're doing the Reframing of Disability. Obviously, I'm aware you've got some journalism and producer courses coming up next week. Whilst we're recording this, it's next week. What's next for you at the moment?
I'm actually, very excitingly, next week is actually my final week full-time at Media Trust, because I'm starting a master's at the University of Malaya in Kuala Lumpur, which is a really exciting opportunity, which I got through a scheme called the Queen Elizabeth Commonwealth Scholarship. And it's something I always wanted to do. I've always wanted to do a master's, and for quite a while now, I've I've wanted to do some research and work into disability and disability activism in developing countries, because I'm aware that all of my work so far has been in the UK and has often been through a very Eurocentric lens. So I'm really excited to be starting this master's in development studies, so looking at developing countries and not as trying to move away from that trope of these developing countries need to learn from our brilliant Britain, but actually making it a two-way street of the things that we're good at, we can teach to the world, but also the things that different countries are doing better than we are, that they can then sort of teach to us, and sort of that mutual exchange of ideas that helps to develop, disabled people's activism and advocacy and so on. So I'm really looking forward to that. Obviously, it's a very weird moment, because I'm, in theory, leaving my job and starting this degree on the other side of the world. But of course, all I'm really doing is coming back to the same kitchen table and just joining a different Zoom meeting. But the really nice thing about it as well is that although I won't be working at Media Trust full-time anymore, I will still be a freelancer running those training sessions for the media industry on disability. So I'm really glad that I can stay with them, because they're an amazing organization.
We would love to hear more about Media Trust and learn more about the work which they're doing. But what you're doing at the moment when you go to university, obviously, if there wasn't any pandemic, would you normally been able to have flew out there and be a part?
Yeah, so I'm very hopeful that within a few months, we'll have to see how things go, but I'm hopeful that I can eventually be flying out to KL, which will be an interesting balance of time differences. I may find myself staying up into the early hours of the morning delivering trainings, which is exciting, but a little nerve-wracking. But I think it's becoming more and more normal that you can. One thing that this pandemic has done, and I think will last beyond the end of the pandemic, hopefully we have such a moment, but I think even after that sort of global mobility and the ability to work across the world, and deliver sessions in Switzerland and then pop off to America and then head off to Korea or whatever, is just will become much more normal, and I think that's a really exciting thing.
And it's also good for carbon footprint as well, keeping our carbon down. We're not all getting trains everywhere now, we're not driving everywhere or flying, so it can also help out on projects as well to keep our carbon footprint down.
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely, for organizations like the BBC, which do have so many studios all over, some big, some smaller, being able to do so much from home, or just at least, even if you need to go in for, say, a down the line interview, if you live in Nottinghamshire and you can go to Nottingham to do your down the line instead of having to come to London, that makes things not only so much better for carbon footprint, but also so much more accessible for so many people.
And that's the biggest thing I've realized with the pandemic, on how accessible we can now make things, as we've spoken about previously. All these jobs that were never able to work from home, whether or not it was a trust thing with managers or people that know your job can't be done, we are now seeing all these jobs that can be, and this might become some of the new working, in that you only go into the office 1 day, 2 days.
Yeah.
This is so much from buildings.
And I'm so encouraged by one thing that I've always really hated, is this sort of culture of presenteeism, where your work is more assessed by how much you're seen to be doing something rather than how much you're actually achieving. And one thing I really love about my charity and working at Media Trust is we have such an amazing supportive group of people as managers, and sort of getting told, if you need to finish early, if you need to start late, if you need to take a long lunch break and go for a long walk, if you need to take annual leave at short notice because you're feeling overwhelmed, then please, let's try and make that possible as much as we can, because this is, we all have times like that, but especially at the moment in this lockdown 3, it's so easy to feel overwhelmed. And as I mentioned before, I've been just taking Fridays off for the past few weeks, and even just doing a 4-day week has made such a difference for me.
Do you find yourself, because you are taking Fridays off, that you are doing a 5-day week rather than a 4-day week?
I think sometimes that does end up happening. Definitely yesterday I was working later than I'd planned, but I've also I've been trying as much as possible to make sure that my workload can match as well. So another thing which my boss actually said at the start of January, this is her New Year's resolution, and she's encouraged us all to do the same, is to say no more, be able to say, I don't actually have capacity to do that, and recognize that we are all human and have our limits, and we can't just do everything that gets thrown at us. And that's, that's okay.
Today's an exception, but I do Zoom free day Friday. So
oh, that's amazing. Oh, well, thank you for making an exception for me, but that's also a really good idea.
Anything day job wise, especially on a Friday, I'm like, no, it's a Zoom free day. And because it's also my study day, until like April, it means I can keep that discipline in place. Obviously, I can do these during my lunch break, I can do them after work, I can do them before, but I am trying to keep those days, because otherwise you're just on back to back, back to back, back to back, back to back. But some people might just rock up, where me and my brain is, I'll be thinking like, what's behind me? Like, is there something on show that shouldn't be on show? Do I need to move my chair in? Is the canvas okay? Or what about my jumper? Have I spilt something down it and go, yeah, I have. Because in the office, you don't have to take those sort of things into account. And you've got a load of my friends, they won't even go on camera. And that can sometimes be difficult if you've never met colleagues, because I'm always trying to look for the green square so I know who's talking. It's almost like, who's talking now? It's like trying to follow it. But if you're in person, it would be easier. But I guess because I'm like introvert and extrovert, I can't look both. I live alone, so I love the peace. I love the quiet. I love being able to do what I want when I want. I think lockdown would have irritated me if I was with somebody, because probably getting in my way a little bit. So I'm quite blessed with that, where I know other people's working on will be very different. But then I've also got friends that are living alone and they're absolutely hating it because they need that face-to-face and that human contact.
Absolutely. And I have friends who would always we'd always joke that they were sort of the most introverted in the group, and they'd never come to the pub or whatever, or we'd only see them one every 5 times that we'd meet up. But even for a lot of those people, they are now, getting to the point where they're really feeling the need for that contact. But I think it does vary. It varies a lot from person to person. And I've been actually, since late November, I've been back with my parents up north near Manchester, because in London our house was 3, and lived with 2 amazing friends, but both of them, we just realized that our house wasn't the most conducive place to stay in lockdown. So everyone sort of headed off to either family or friends or partners. And the idea of being by myself, for me, that would be impossible. So being home with my parents is, although I'm not seeing friends, is still a nice to have some company at least.
And how did the parents find having you back? Are they enjoying it?
It's an interesting question. I wonder. Yeah, like it's a strange time, because my youngest brother just started university, so he headed off. So my parents had, for about 2 months, they were just the 2 of them at home, which, bearing in mind that's for the first time in 27 years that they've had no kids at home. So I think that was probably quite weird. I'm sure I get in the way a little bit, but I try and stay out of the way, and I try and cook sometimes, and I think sometimes it can feel a bit like going back to being a child, where your parents just do everything for you and they cook and clean, and you just sort of laze around. So I try to participate a little bit, but I think I should probably try and do a bit more around the house.
I have the same when I go back to my parents, because my parents are my bubble. So I'll go and stay at their house, and I'll leave the bedroom, and I'll come back and my bed's made, and I'm like, Mum, it's fine. Oh no, the house off that. My PJs are refolded back. I'll finish my tea, and I've no sooner put my plate down. Okay, there's nothing there, and it's like, Mum, I'm taking it into the kitchen, it's fine. And she's like, no, I just don't want mess around the house. I've not spent all day cleaning. I'm like, we've got nothing else to do. You can't.
Yeah. It's so funny how quickly you go back to that. And it's also because also I grew up in a small village, not too far from Manchester, but still sort of far enough that it wasn't like living in the city. And I've not lived here since I moved down to the southeast for university and then to London. So I've not been living up here for almost 10 years, and just the whole location and the whole setting, just it feels like stepping. I feel like I should be going to get the school bus in the morning. That's how sort of stepping back it feels, but obviously so much has changed in that time as well.
Totally relate. It's like when I go back to my parents, I don't ever really walk into the town centre, like very rare. And when I'm walking in, I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm going to get lost. Like it's my first time heading to a new place. I'm just kind of like, I remember that bit there. I remember where that was. Oh, that shop got closed. When? I know, didn't know that. Just need to get out more. Even like when I'm at my parents, I stay in or I drive. So it'll be fun. Asda or to the McDonald's, and that's.
Yeah, it's so fun. I've got my Fitbit to try and get like 10,000 steps a day. And I used to, when I was working, I found that even if the only walking I did was just to and from the tube station to get to work, and then to and from the office at each, or on arrival, and then going out for lunch, I would usually get my steps for the day, my 10,000. Whereas now it really feels like a huge effort just to even just go for a short walk.
To do that now. When I was at work, obviously I'd be going from like the car park into the office, and you've got around the building, and then it's from your office back to the car park at the end of the day. Now I average out at about maybe 300 a day, 300 steps.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, then I tend to do that little more. But you're going from about a tiny little bit where before it was like a lot more.
Totally. And I think the thing that I really need isn't even so much the walking, it's just the fresh air. But the cold and the short days makes that really hard. In lockdown 1, which was like in spring and then going into summer, I used to love going. It was like my favorite part of the day was going for a walk in the sun and the heat, or going for a bike ride. And now it's like it's muddy everywhere, and it's dark and it's cold, and there's often snow or ice or something on the ground, and it's taken all the fun out of it. But I really do need to get out at least once a day, otherwise I just start to go a bit round the wall.
Some of the things that we've said between a few of our friends is when we are having phone calls, if it's like a Zoom meeting, it just be an audio only, and joining and getting out and actually going for a walk and doing a call. Because when
Totally.
in buildings, we do walk and talk meetings. So those ones are happening outside. We lap the area, lap the trees, and we'll walk and talk meeting. And that used to come from quite senior, like a lot of senior managers used to do that as well. And it's to get fresh air, to get out, to be active, and then it helps your well-being.
Yeah, totally. I think it's really important. And but my partner lives abroad, so I've not seen him since early November, and I think it's going back to the theme of the podcast, and I think it's when you're living with a partner, you sort of motivate each other, and you get each other. You're like, get up, go. We're going for a walk now. Go and make breakfast. Don't lie in bed. And you sort of give each other that motivation. When that person's not there, you lose that a little bit, and you have to motivate yourself entirely. And I'm not that kind of person. Like I'm not. I very much admire those people who can get up at 6 a.m. and go for a run before they start work. But that's just not me. And so I sort of need to give myself that push to go and do stuff.
Whereabouts is your partner living at the moment?
He lives in northern Poland, so it's been a bit of a challenge. I lived in China for a year, and he was in Europe at the time. So obviously he visited me for a month, but otherwise we had like 6 months at a time not seeing each other. And then so when I came back to the UK and he was in Poland, it sort of felt like next door by comparison. I could just pop over for like a 20 quid flight and just go for a weekend. But then the pandemic obviously threw that out. So I was, during the sort of September time when things were all a little bit easier and cases were lower and sort of rules were more lax, I was fortunate to be able to get over there for about 2 months, which was really, really amazing. But obviously I don't know how much longer we're going to be waiting before we get back to international travel. It feels like, obviously I was very glad to be able to do it, but it feels like they may have loosened the rules too quickly, too soon. And that's what's potentially caused this huge increase in cases. So I'll have to wait and see when travel's possible again.
Hopefully it'll be so much worth it. A lot of people say it's about the quality. It's the quality, it's not the quantity of time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, like even like when I would only be able to go like on Friday evening and come back on Monday morning, and literally that quick, just turn around, it would always feel like a proper weekend and like I really got something done. Whereas, you know, sort of standard mid-pandemic weekend of just sort of doing basically the same thing you do on a working day, except without checking your emails. It just goes so quickly. You're like, oh, it's Monday again. Here we are. That's that.
And how long have you two been together now?
We've been together for 6.5 years, which is quite scary. Yeah. So met in Oxford, lived together, didn't live together, but Oxford's tiny, so lived very close. Then lived in London together for 2 years. Then I went off to China, he went traveling. And then when I got back from China, he moved to Poland. So been a, you know, difficult 2 years in that regard. But also I think if we can get through this amount of time living so far apart, then I think he's a keeper.
I 100% agree. And I don't know if you're similar to myself, but I've always preferred also long distance. Like I like the social contact, but I don't want them in my face every day. Like it probably irritate me. Like one's there non-stop, non-stop.
Yeah, well, when we first moved to London, obviously we were both and sort of getting our entry-level jobs after university, and we could only afford a studio. We didn't want to live with others, and it was our first chance living together, and we thought, okay, we'll just get a studio flat. And it was a terrible decision because obviously a studio, when you're annoyed with each other, there's nowhere to go. There's no, you know, there's literally, you're stuck in the same room just seething with each other. Whereas actually after that, we realized, actually, why don't we just get a room in a shared flat, live with others? But then, you know, when we do need a break, one of us can be in the bedroom, one of us can be in the living room or in the kitchen or whatever. Like there's more space to spread around and sort of have your own space. And I think that's really, really important. And actually when I was in Poland as well, Poland's in a much better situation than we are. So offices are open and he could go to the office every day to work. I worked from home because obviously I didn't have my British office in Poland. And having that break in the day meant that we were way more excited to do stuff together in the evening. Whereas during the period when we were both stuck at home working in our sort of home office together, it sort of it didn't make the evening feel as exciting to spend time together.
No, I totally agree. And I think that's where a lot of couples have either broke up or become stronger. Because people are in the faces too much, they've started to think, well, I can't live with this person 24/7. And that's where sometimes people have come up with the bad habits, the situations. And also it's where some other people have got on fantastic. And it's really, really worked well for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think it sort of puts the cat among the pigeons when you have to spend time together. And it's really interesting as well hearing from friends, like obviously most people have never seen their partners in a professional context, and realizing how different people are when they're in a professional context compared to, you know, how they talk to their colleagues compared to how they are with their friends it's often really sort of discombobulating, I guess. Like it's just not, you don't expect to see your friend who you mainly know from the pub or, you know, someone that you know through purely social events being sort of professional and and sort of calm and collected. It's a weird sort of our double lives, I guess.
Meeting the pets, meeting the children. We've had people deliver the food whilst they're during conference calls. Like you'll just see this person come around, this plate come through, and then they just carry on. And I'll have a burger too, please. I'll have a cup of coffee, but what? Or like with one of my other colleagues, his parents will come in and we'll bring him coffees and stuff during the day. And he would just like that to his mum and dad, like 2 minutes. And I'll be like, hello there, mister.
And also, yeah, seeing people with kids as well. It's like, it's lovely. But I think at the start of the pandemic, people were really worried and really apologetic. Like, oh, sorry, my kids might come and interrupt. I'm really, really sorry about it. And everyone, most some annoying people, but most people are like, no, this is a lovely distraction from the day. Let your kid come and chat to us for a bit. And, you know, being very understanding of that. And that's quite nice as well. But then you see people who, again, you only ever see in a professional context, and all of a sudden they're a mum or a dad. It's a very different experience of very different behavior.
Mum, sister, niece, it's so many different titles that one person can have and seen them. As you were saying, it's like how I am at work to how I am maybe with my niece or with my goddaughter or my best friend or my parents is very different all the time. I think one of my worst times was I was on a call with someone that's extremely senior, and I had to stay at my parents because I cancelled my day off work, and I was meant to be off, but it was the only time this person could meet me. So I thought, I'll cancel my day off. I was meant to be at a wedding, so it was kind of do the meeting, head straight to the wedding.
Oh my gosh.
And my mum knocked on. I was like, Mum, don't disturb me. I says, I'm going to do this, I need to do this meeting. If you can knock back, don't you tell me when I can't back my house. I was just like, 1 hour, I'm asking you for 1 hour. Do not come up. You do this meeting. I'm professional. Okay, no problem. Okay, do you need a shower? I've left a towel in the room for you. No, it was 2 seconds. Come on, I want to. I need to know if you want to have a shower. If you don't want to have a shower, okay, then I'll just get on with cleaning the bathroom.
Was the person on the other end of the call understanding, or did they just pretend it hadn't happened?
Hopefully, did not hear. It was
okay. That's good.
Mind your teeth. It's just like 2 seconds. I think they've seen everything though these days, but this is why I'm glad when I'm at home, because the only disturbance I really get is the postman, and that's about it.
Yeah. Well, I had to buy these because there is sometimes noise around, and I work in the sort of kitchen table, as I said, so quite often people come and get lunch, which is why I'm wearing these very funky telemarketing headphones. They look like, I do look like I'm in a call center, but they're really good for sort of keeping the noise out from the rest of the room. So this has been a big introduction, and I had to buy these because when I was in Poland, there was building work going on outside all the time, and it was literally so loud that you couldn't hear yourself think. So I got these, and they're noise cancelling, and they've got this microphone, and that's made a huge impact on my quality of life as a regular Zoom user.
It's like I'm trialing different ones at the moment to find out what's best. I think one of my worst situations was I was doing one of my exams, so thankfully I passed. I was doing my associates in project management. And I wrote a sign and I put it on my door to say, I'm in an exam, please do not knock, ring the doorbell, do not do anything. If a parcel's arriving, give it next door. Halfway through my exam, ding dong, bang, 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 bang. As I said. And all I heard is, okay, are you in? Do you need anything from Asda? Intentions, but read the sign.
Yeah, it's really, really difficult in situations like that as well. And yeah, doing exams where obviously you have to like completely be sat just at your computer. You can't have any interruptions, and then life goes on around you.
Yeah, I had to give a full tour of my room. Like there was like, we need to see your ceiling to ensure you've got nothing on your ceiling. Camera up. Can you show us under the desk, please? Under the desk, I had to do a 360. I had to have a camera behind me so they could see me front. Camera on the side. So it was basically everything had to be on camera. And I really halfway through, and usually they'd stop or someone would come with you. And they said I could go, but I thought I daren't go because if I go and then I come back and then I'm like, oh, I thought of something. Am I gonna
yeah. Well, yeah, it seems kind of unsustainable, really. What they really need to do is just make it an open book exam so that you are allowed to read notes. They can still assess you on the merits of what you've written, but I don't really understand the obsession with doing exams where you have to remember everything. Like, surely the assessment should be on your ability to write something critical and well analyzed rather than your ability to remember all the facts. But yeah.
Academic and know absolutely everything and get a distinction. But like let's say yourself, if I said to you, right, go out there and write something up for me on how to use Avid, how to use Photoshop, you might be able to go away and do me a distinction piece. But if I to say, can you edit this photo? You might not have a clue
Mm.
how to do it or be able to do it creatively. And that's what sometimes really gets me at uni. Like all my written elements when I did radio production, I scored extremely low on the academic, but then I was getting 80s and 90s on anything production based because I'm a visual, I'm a doer, I can do it that way. I just can't get head to paper. That's where I struggle, but that is then where I flourish.
Yeah. And it's just not reflective of the professional world. Like in the professional world, you don't have to just like remember something without any help and then just do it. Like you can research, you can check something that you've forgotten, you can, ask for help on a particular point. Like, and my colleagues constantly come to me, for example, to help with spreadsheets like Microsoft Excel. And I'm like famous in my office for being really good at Excel. 99% of the time that they come to me, I have to go and Google what they've asked. And I go and Google it, find the answer and tell them. And then they were like, wow, Chris, you're so good at spreadsheets. But so much of the time I'm not at all. I'm literally just, I'm good at, I know which websites to look at to find the answer. And that is in itself a skill, but it's not that I'm just an expert on Excel.
I had the same this week. So I was creating a load of like mind maps and spreadsheets and presentation for people. And I had a load of emails because I did a template for everybody to edit, and everyone was like, wow, that's amazing, like that's incredible, like how did you have the time to create this? And I'm just kind of like, templates that I've used before, just repurposed for different situations. Yeah,
totally.
So where can people go to find out more about yourself and Reframing Disability, and also the media trust, so people can find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. So please do, if you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm at Chris Perk, Perkk. Decision I made when I was 19 to make that my avatar. I'm not really sure why. And yeah, if you want to get into, do have a look on the Media Trust website, mediatrust.org, because we have an amazing, this is just one small piece of what we do. We work with loads of charities and work with the media industry, particularly trying to get more young people from marginalized backgrounds into the media industry. So do check us out. And if you do want to get in touch, it's really easy, just info@mediatrust.org, and we'll be sure to get back to you pretty quickly. We're a really small team. So generally we sort of, you'll always get your inquiry answered by the right person, but we're also very effective. So we do loads of different stuff. And even if you can't find information on a project that you think is relevant on the website, do get in touch, because there's loads of stuff we're interested to do, resources to promote and so on.
No, that's amazing. It's, I've seen the work you guys do and I think it's incredible. I'm really looking forward myself to go. I've been on some of them before, but I'm redoing the disability journalism production one next week. So yeah, fantastic. And it can really shape your industry, and it can really shape your business and improve diversity, not only within the team, but in your content as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kay.
No, thank you.